We'll call the finance meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Pat Kinney,
Here.
Blake Ellefson,
Here.
Ron Stendor, Brad Ray, and Dick Poofall are all excused. So we have Gary Mertig.
Here. And given that we need the board chair to make a quorum here, he'll be a voting member today. Next, we'll go to number 2, approval of the agenda.
I'd make a motion to approve the amended agenda that we move item H to in front of 4A.
This is Blake. I'll second that amended agenda with moving the airport up to the first.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Number 3, public comments. Is there anyone here for public comment? Anyone here in the room, online, or the phone for public comment? Anyone for public comment in the room, the phone, or online? Hearing none, we'll move to number 4, the discussion items. We will go to the airport, which is H.
Okay, so this is on the agenda because, sorry, I can't see. I gotta move this. So the airport had been running an operating deficit for a number of years. And while the city sent us invoices, they never told us what they were. It was just dollar amounts. So the clerk's office would just say, well, what is this for? And then never get an answer. So they would never pay the bill. So now, Julie Valancourt went over all this stuff the other day, 2 weeks ago, and it turns out we owe $34,500 and going back to 2020. The 2024 number is not due yet because it has not been audited. Their audit hasn't come in yet. So that number is not actual to date. When it does become actual, it will be 7849. So because of the dollar amount and the length of time, I wanted to bring this to Finance Committee to get approval to pay this. And we do have the airport director here if there's any questions from him about the airport and this bill.
Well,
Blake?
if it's really the city's responsibility to make sure that they're getting paid on this and that they're billing us correctly. And so
Yep.
I guess what's going to ensure that changes, even if we pay this, which I'm okay, we have to pay it. Ultimately, we owe it.
Right.
But how do we ensure that for 2024, once the audit comes back, they bill us and we write a check?
And they tell us what the bill is for. I believe Derek you're probably going to make sure that it happens. So, sorry, Derek didn't have the microphone on. He did say he was going to do that. So I guess I don't really need a vote if you don't want to, but just letting everybody know we're going to pay this bill.
Yeah, normally the city with their finance director is really on top of everything. So this is an anomaly, but part of what changed, and I forget just how many years ago when budgets were tight, both for the city and the county, there was an agreement that they were going to pay a certain amount. And then if there was more, then they would request that to fill a gap. And my guess is that because of how they changed, this might have got missed. Because we used to contribute enough that they had enough. And then this sort of thing didn't happen. But we said, look, if you need more because expenses are higher, then we'll make up the difference. So my guess is it's related to that.
It is. And to be clear, we've been appropriating the amounts that the city has told us to year after year.
Yeah. So I would still prefer a vote on this. Just
It's up to you if you'd like
yeah,
a vote.
just
Yeah.
saying, well, we have our airport representative here.
Well, I think, do you want to make a motion on it?
Sure. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I'd make a motion that we approve paying this bill, the outstanding that's due, the
34,500.
34,500 for the last few years.
And then can you include in that motion to pay the audited amount for 2024 when it becomes available?
Yeah, once the audited amount's available, we would pay that and then we need to get billed correctly.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Yep. So then we'll go back to item 4A, approval of the Finance and Economic Development Committee meeting minutes from June 11th. So we're on approval of the minutes.
Blake will make a motion to approve the Finance and Economic Development meeting from June 11th, 2025.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we'll go to number 4B, Financial Consultants Update with Steve and Mike.
Good afternoon. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks, Dan, for putting up the report. It's in your packet. I know it didn't come out until today. Our apologies. We always try to wait. This report is through the end of June, so we try to let all the transactions get made as much as we can through period 6, which is June. There's still a couple that aren't in here that people are working on. And there are some notes here to kind of show you what the differences are. Like in the general fund revenues, obviously last year you had property tax aid that came in for that tax, the Sanborn property, the DOR aid that you received. Highway, the county road and bridges, I believe they are up through May. So they're actually, pretty close. June isn't done yet. So hopefully they're getting caught up and will be more current. I think, things look pretty much in line. I certainly noted a couple things I'll talk to Sue about, but nothing major enough that I feel like I need to bring it up. But just some things I noticed that looked odd. They might be right, but we'll go over that. So if there are any questions, I'd certainly be happy to entertain questions, but I think it looks fairly normal.
Any questions? So we're getting halfway through the year, so some of those odds and ends of nuances are starting to even out, so it looks closer to what it'll look like when we get to the end of the year if all goes well. So
Yeah, the biggest revenue that, isn't something that comes in every month or even halfway through the year are your shared revenues. On this report, you've received no shared revenue. You'll get 15% this month in July, and then 85% will be in November. So that's a big, number in your budget, but that's about the only thing that while it's not, 50% by June, it's the normal kind of procedure, the way it works with the state. So just to point that out.
Blake?
So when you talk about the shared revenue, now that's that relatively new item, right? Or is this,
Well, there was a new portion of shared revenue that was given to municipalities, but there was a portion that was existing too. But yes, you are correct. I think maybe 2 years ago in the budget or last year's budget, there wasn't a increase for most municipalities. And there is a report that's due to the state with, how that's being spent. The clerk did file that timely. And so we are in compliance with that.
The big change in shared revenue was how they funded it. Now it's 1% of the 5% sales tax. That's would become shared revenue now. So sales tax increases, shared revenue increases. So we're looking at next year's shared revenue increase, taking into account for all the things they made non-taxable at 3.4% increase in 26 and a 2.1 in 27.
This is Gary. Just a question, and I think you mentioned that the last item of their major funds, the highway department, and they're at 23% in 6 months. Is that normal?
Well, I think a lot of things factor into that. I think there's a couple people from the highway on here, but the winter I don't think was probably quite as bad. And the highway, a lot of their work is probably construction projects in the summertime. So,
Okay.
as I stated, June is not in here. So there could be costs there that, June, July, and August are probably going to be bigger months. So,
Good. Okay, thank you.
yeah.
Anything else? We'll move on to 4C, the 2024 audit.
Steve, and Mike, is there any specific page I should go to?
Well, I mean, I think I noticed you have fund balance on here. So if you wanted to go to page 7, I think it is.
Yeah, 7 and 10.
Yeah. I mean, obviously we're skipping over stuff here, which is good to read, but it's not something you need to cover in depth. Oh, we're on yeah, there you go. Page 7. It's going to be a little further of the PDF.
Oh, yeah, of the file.
I'm sorry, of the document. Yeah, one more right here.
Yeah, balance.
So, and if you, yeah, there you go, the fund balance. So, your total fund balance is 6,797,590. But then there are other components of that are comprised, non-spendable, restricted, committed, and unassigned. And I think the one that most governmental entities like to compare is the unassigned, which is the last one, the 2,527,694. And I think that number is probably the largest it's been in a long time for you guys. It was a lot less in years past. Of course, some of that had to do with those Sanborn properties that were delinquent taxes that were out there, because anything that is a receivable like that you were holding, the auditors would have made a note and said it was non-spendable. So you have to pledge your fund balance against that. With that being gone, that allowed some of that non-spendable to slide back down and be unassigned, if that makes sense. So you guys are in much better shape than you have been since we've known you, and I think you're on the right track. Not to skip ahead, but as long as we're on this page, later on you have a section or an agenda item, fund balance resolution. Again, the way governments measure themselves financially, one way is by how much unassigned fund balance do you have as compared to your general fund expenditures, which, so if we make a note here, 2,527,694, and then Dan, if you want to go 3 pages further to 10, you'll see the detail of the general fund revenues and expenses. Yep, here we go. So if you look up Government Finance Officers Association, which is referred to as GFOA a lot, they'll reference, you can either mark off of revenues or expenses in your general fund. We typically like expenditures better because taxes are in your revenues, and you're really, that's really not, you set that, it's collected. So we kind of like better to look at the expenditure side. So the 13,145,000, if you compare your fund balance that you currently have to that, I think you're at about 19. I got sheets here on that.
Yeah, 19.228%
Yeah.
yesterday.
Yep. So, I think you're right in the target zone of where you'd like to be. GFOA would say about 16% should be in your unassigned. You're above that, you don't have too much money. So I think, but you're right in the sweet spot. So I think you're in a good position, and it's good to have the discussion about the resolution for the fund balance policy, which I'll just kind of point this out, and then we can go to that later. And if there are other questions on the financials, we can certainly, answer if we can or get you answers. So I don't know, I think this was in your agenda and I know it makes great bedtime material to read, but it's you guys are in good shape. I think things are looking good. I don't know, Mike, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, if you wanna, Dan, can you scroll down just a little bit further? The bottom of the page there, you can see your general fund went up by 1.9 million this year. And that, again, that's what Steve mentioned. That's, and the majority of that, I think about 1.6 million was the additional aid from the state. So even without that, you had a positive budget year, which is obviously what you want to see. So, and I think we talked about the fund balance before too, the non-spendable. Most of that is the amount that was loaned to the self-insurance fund. And
Yep.
some of that should come back at the end of 25 or when that's straightened out. So
That was the amount, Dan, back on page 7. That first number in your fund balance kind of breakdown.
yeah, I think it was around 2.5
Yeah,
million,
6, 9.
2.9. Yeah. Well, some of that is the regular delinquent taxes. I think 600,000 or 700,000 is delinquent taxes.
Which again is because the county is, I'll refer to it as the broker of the property tax kind of situation in the state. And what I mean by that is, towns, cities, villages levy taxes that get put on tax bills. The county levies taxes that gets put on the tax bill. But then at some point, the county settles with all those entities and makes them whole. And then they collect that tax. So they're now holding that receivable. So you kind of broker that deal. So anything that's left uncollected, you have to have funds to kind of manage that. And that's where I think your unassigned comes in, is, you want to have liquidity so that your shared revenues don't come in until 15% in July and 85% in November too. So you got to kind of figure that into your cash flow too.
So
do you think-
Steve, yesterday, and I was looking at this, I was thinking about the budget being 35 million, so I was, thinking of expenditures more in that range. So I did get to page 10 correctly, but it didn't strike me as what I was anticipating. But now as I look at reading those potential fund balance policy documents and looking at the non-spendable, the restricted, and the committed, and now we've got about 800,000 that we need to spend on HVAC. If you're looking at this audit, is there anything, and especially if you know that we got an HVAC, project coming up that's expensive, we got a roof for HHS coming up, I don't know when, but it's coming up, that won't be small. Is there anything that you look at in this audit and kind of knowing the county overall with what we have ahead of us that you would suggest we pay attention to or anticipate and plan for?
Well, Dan, could you go to the attachment that says available funds? Because I think that's going to pretty much line up here with the audit. So, we had predicted your unassigned to be 2527. Okay. It's a little different than that. This was a month ago. I think I presented this to you. So, looking at this, because Pat, you're asking specifically about projects that you need to fund coming up, one-time things that, the county, how do we pay for that, right?
Right, and I don't know that we really planned for them as well as we could have, but not that it's been easy for the last few years just to
Yeah.
get through things, but.
Yep. So, on this page here, the one thing that I would say stands out to me are your American Rescue Plan LATCF funds. You've got just over, 1.1 million of funds. Those are in the same tranche of revenue, like your ARPA funds you receive. So I believe they have the same requirements that you need to spend it by 2026. I think those were being held to for like central dispatch and other things. And I think some of them were used for that. But obviously, in about a year and a half, you're going to have to spend that, or they'll take it back. So I would say, my advice to you is I would focus on that first, because while those funds are nice, you're earning interest right now, you can't just keep them forever. They have to be put into play and used in some fashion, or you have to send them back.
I thought those were just a pilt payment for the Chequamegon Forest.
I think in discussion with the auditors, they were funds that came through the American Rescue Plan, and I think they have a requirement. I mean, I could be wrong on that, Dan, but I think it's something we need to check out because I think they had similar requirements.
Okay.
That is significant because we've been scratching our heads like, how do we pay for this jail thing? And now you just kind of hit the golden goose that might be able to kind of. Because right now, I think what Pat's saying is, hey, we feel great looking at the audit, but then we feel terrible talking at the finance committee because we realize we've got to invest at least 800,000, I think, into the jail, and we have to pay for that this year. And so if we can use those American Rescue Plan that funds for that, that would be significant for us because I think we're struggling. Do we borrow? Do we pay half with cash, borrow the other, or do we pay all our cash from this fund? And I think all of us here are hoping maybe you guys could help us figure out the best. I mean, we're not on that yet, so I don't mean to jump ahead, but that's a big item.
Well,
Yeah.
but so from looking at the audit, Dan sent this to me a while back and I looked at it more yesterday. And then reading those fund balance things helped me kind of see the very bigger picture of, how things work and then thinking about the planning stuff. But I think that as you look at that audit, I mean, obviously people like Mike and Steve and Dan are going to get way more out of the audit than I'm going to get out of it. But there's a lot of things that if you read through it, you can see where we're at. And if you know what the county has ahead of it with some of our projects, the HVAC, the HHS roof, things like that, you can look at the audit and it's a big picture of where we're at, but maybe sometimes that includes things that we need to, close out if that's what one of these is. So Steve, do you think we can get a definitive answer on this? We got a board meeting Tuesday. And we're
Yep.
planning on approving an item for funding the jail. But if we need to use this money, do you think you could get a definitive answer before then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. I'll say yes to that. I'm actually looking right now at the Treasury kind of regulations on it. I mean, you have reporting similar to ARPA that you have to report, and it spells out eligible use of funds, compliance, or reporting. I'm just trying to see if there's I'll find it. I'll get it for you.
And then at the bottom with capital projects, there's 1.7 million there. So it
Yeah.
leads me to this question. We're trying to maintain some fund balance and we've got some money squirreled away, but that's under a special revenue fund. It's not under the general fund. So if we squirreled some money away for good reasons, what are guidelines do we use on when using it would make sense as we look at, say our fund balance and other things?
Yeah. So if you recall, the way you are currently funding your capital outlay has been through the borrowing that you do, the short-term borrowing, like in November, December, and then you pay it off in February. The reason that 1,722,053 stands out in those capital funds is you borrowed most of that in November, December to be spent this year. Okay. So
Okay.
yeah, so
On highway
that
projects.
that is designated for projects currently.
All right.
Now there could be, a project comes in under budget, one goes over budget. What's the net amount that either surplus or deficit in the fund at the end when everything's paid for? That's got to be monitored because from year to year, you could borrow less, you know, if you had surplus funds out of a capital outlay kind of borrowing and purchasing, you know, that you could, you know, manage that. So, but that's the reason that number's so high is this is a 12/31 balance. You just borrowed it, it's sitting there.
Steve, if I can add, a big portion of that is for road construction.
Yeah,
That's going to be transferred to the highway when they spend it.
I think 1 million is
A
right.
million about is, yeah.
Yeah.
So towards the top of the page, we've got total committed. And again, I'm not an accountant, but why wouldn't this be under the committed then? Because that's what it sounds like.
Well, because it's in its own separate fund. So
But it
it,
still falls under the umbrella of committed here, at least in this case.
well, it's,
Yeah,
yeah, it's
it's
specific.
still committed or it's really restricted from a borrowing resolution.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, the committed up above is just merely your general fund. Okay. These are the other funds that are not part of the general fund. So they are committed for those purposes listed, you know, down the left there, county road and bridges, health and human services, so on and so forth.
Yeah, by law, they're either committed or restricted. Like jail assessments, you'd consider that a restricted because there's a statute behind it.
Yeah.
So I just have a question because this has come up. If there's a significant project and let's say we didn't have the amount of unassigned funds available, do we at Ashland County have the ability to issue long-term debt? Have we
Yes.
ever, have we, but we just, from a simplicity standpoint, have never needed it, and so we haven't issued it, right?
Correct. Most of your debt is falls into the notes that you're doing, you know, from November, December till February. There are a couple longer term things for projects, I think, from 4, 5, 6 years ago. But yes, a municipality can borrow. The limitation on the borrowing is 5% of your equalized value. Dan, if you go to the AFR audit document, up a little bit. Yep, right there. And keep scrolling down. It's going to be in your notes where it talks about long-term debt. It's going to be down a little bit.
Yeah, it's going to be down of 20 pages or so.
Yeah, keep going. So now you're in the notes. Just when you see long-term debt, keep going. Oh, long-term. Okay, now go a little further.
Yeah, that's just defining it.
Going. Keep
Yeah,
going.
you had quite a bit yet, a few pages. No, keep going.
Oh, right here.
Right there, right there.
Just scroll down just a tad, a skosh. So you see the, oh, the other way. Sorry, up a little bit. So you just get the whole, there. Sorry, stop.
Next page.
Next page, right there. So it's titled long-term obligations. So here is what is sitting, you know, at the end of 2024, you had, you know, 3.5 million of long-term liabilities, which that short-term borrowing you do, it's important to note that that is issued as a note for 366 days, so it qualifies as long-term. And when the county has no intention of doing that, but it's a loophole. So you issue it as long-term. So that's in here too. And that will get paid off in February. But the county, if you scroll down a little bit more, Dan, it'll do a calculation of how much debt the county could issue.
Yeah,
So there you go.
it lists the issues on that bottom page, but yeah.
Keep going here. Legal margin for debt. So you have the capacity to issue $92,288,720 of debt. I don't think you need that. Most municipalities don't come close. But you know,
think-
you have the ability to issue debt up to that point, general obligation debt.
I think we're happy with where we're at, but it does help us from um, just show us again how low of leverage we have. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, no, you guys are in a really good spot because of that, 3 million that's sitting there, you paid off probably half of that already this year, right? So
Yeah.
you'll issue more and pay it off next year, but it's really not growing year over year. So I think you're in a good spot. But to answer your question, the county can obviously borrow from a bank like you have been. You can work with a financial advisor and issue, notes or bonds and, go to the market for that. If you were in that arena doing that, then policies like you're looking at fund balance policies, having a good fund balance amount all factor into an equation because Moody's or Standard and Poor's would be rating your issue, because these instruments would be sold on the open market. You or I could buy them, right? And so because of that, there's official statements issued which disclose all the facts of the county, financial information, everything that somebody who would be investing in that security would want to know about the entity before they buy it. And of course, Moody's and S&P have their scorecards they use. There's a lot of factors that go into that. And in some cases, you could have 100% fund balance and you might not get AAA, but because there's other factors, demographic things, economy things, things like that, that they weigh into it. But I think a sweet spot is that 15 to 30% range, somewhere in there is probably what you'd most likely see. I know some places that we work with, have policies up to 50%, I think Dunn County, and that's in your packet here, which probably is on the high side, but they do have that much, so they're fortunate. All good questions.
Okay, yeah, Dunn County is 35 to 50%. Let's go to the HVAC item then.
So here's the quote. I'll just go to the number.
And the question is going to be how to pay for this. And Dan, as I look through this, I don't see a specific date on when August 7th is mentioned.
Yeah, that's when we have to pay them.
But then there's also language on billing. So there's August 7th, and if you go down, so right there in 5. So the term's net 30 days, which if that's in there, would suggest, to me at least, that they'll bill us as we go and we pay as we go versus the whole thing up front. I don't see a sentence that says we pay the whole thing up front.
Dave Dawson is on the line. Dave, can you answer that question?
Can you hear me, guys?
Yes.
I was under the impression that they would carry the remainder for the next year. I can verify that with Jamar. And I will call them right now and let you guys know. But that was our impression when they met with the sheriff. The down payment was I believe the 100 grand. I believe that was the initial term. Is that still listed in the proposal?
No, it's not, because in order to give us longer terms,
Gotcha.
they needed the money this year to hedge against steel prices.
Okay.
So-
What question would you like me to ask Jamar, or do you want me to see if I can get him online?
Well,
You could get him, if you could talk to him, we could come back to this item. Maybe we could get clarity, because if we end up borrowing money, we would need to know, are we borrowing the whole amount and then by when? Or if we can pay as we go, that's a different situation.
Yes, sir. I will find that out.
So do you want
Yeah, let's go
to fund balance?
to
Raider?
4E then, fund balance resolution. So there's two in the packet, one from
Wapaka.
Wapaka County and the other from Dunn County.
So
And Wapaka County at 25% of operating revenues, and Dunn County was the
35 to 50.
35 to 50%. So one part is what percent do we want to put in or range, but also the documents are very similar as far as content, but the Wapaka one I found much more readable. Blake?
Did we select these two based on like comparable like metrics and demographics?
These were easy to obtain.
Okay.
And they're all fairly similar. I I agree with Pat. I like the Wapaka one better because any supervisor can read this and understand it.
Yeah, no, seems like it was a little, I don't want to say dumbered down, but it was
Easier to read.
yeah, less words.
This was written where the audience was anticipated to be the non-professional.
Yeah.
So it's someone, like
Like
me,
a-
I'm not an
yeah.
accountant. And so this was explained in a way that I could follow and make sense of, which actually then helped me when I look back at the audit to understand or appreciate more than I previously did some of what I was looking at in there.
So I believe Steve said 15 to 30% earlier.
I'd like 20. It's
Which
not
we're almost at right now.
close. And this is a goal, right? I mean, it just tells you what to do when you
Gary?
Like, as long as we're there, the advantage of getting it built up, obviously, is with less borrowing, less paying interest, which is more money in our pocket. If that's ever doable,
Well, yeah, and then potentially lower taxes.
well, ultimately, our borrowing is really limited and it's not costing us much. But what it is going to do is it's going to be there for capital project or these unexpected items that come up that, as I've been here for 4 years as a finance on this committee, you don't ever know what is going to happen. And like the opportunity of a building perhaps or whatever, you have to have money. And so this will help us kind of build that little nest so that we can make some positive investments. That's our goal.
So the 20, I mean, we're at, close to 20, which on the one hand is a nice chunk of change, but then when we look at the sheriff HVAC and whatever the HHS roof is, and who else knows what else, we have a space need study that we anticipate will suggest more space. To me, the 25% would be, I wouldn't want to go lower than that, in part because we've got some bigger things coming, or we may have coming. But I think about what capacity does Ashland County have to raise a substantial amount of funds? We really don't. We're either last or second to last in net new construction most years. So we know that coming up with money is hard, and we've had 2 failed referendums. So the chance to build a cushion and try to maintain it seems important, because if we have needs where the cushion isn't enough, we are more challenged, it seems, than most counties to come up with that money.
This is Steve. I did get some further information on the LATCF funds. They do not have the same exact requirements that the ARPA funds do that you spend by the end of 2026. So it is not exactly the same.
Is there a deadline to spend them?
I have not seen a deadline yet, but they do not have the same timelines that the ARPA funds did.
I don't think they do. I think they're literally a pull payment,
Okay.
which, by the way, I have been lobbying Senator Baldwin's office to continue that.
Well, that would be massive if we got any more of that money, right? Because that's relatively new revenue that fills a bucket that we haven't had. So that is huge money. If we can get that continuously.
I don't foresee this Congress doing that. Um, but and after the 26 elections, we'd have a shot of getting that PILT payment back. It greatly benefits Western states who have lots of federal land.
So Pat, you said 25 was where you'd like to start. I'm not opposed to that. I think it's ultimately the goal and we should aspire to have it at 25. I guess, what do you guys think as
Yeah.
Steve,
Say if
Mike?
if I can make a comment here. First of all, um, and I'm a technical accounting guy. That sentence is not written very well, in my opinion. 25% of operating revenues in a governmental fund isn't clearly defined. I would suggest you want to use of operating expenditures is a better, they're roughly the same number anyway. Your revenues equal the expenditures when you budget. It's just and then you want to say of the general fund operating expenditures. I think that's worded better. And keep in mind at 25%, I mean, you're only at 19 now, right, Steve? Is that what it was? 19.2?
Yeah, yep.
See, so you wouldn't be in compliance today with a minimum unassigned fund balance. And
Well, that,
I've seen these more written for will maintain a range of fund balance of X% to Y% is another way to say it.
and that, this is Gary, that was my question. If we use 25% and we're not there, then we need to state in here that that's our goal to get there. And then once we
Yeah.
get there, we could say that's our
Yeah,
minimum.
yeah.
Because that line in here says a county will maintain a minimum, and we're not there yet. So maybe we put another line in there saying our goal is to get to 25, and then once we get there, that'll be our minimum, hopefully.
Yeah, I think a lot of the policies have a range kind of for a reason because it's hard to hit exactly. But then the range allows you, like if you want to be at 25, and let's say you're at 28, if you set it, 15 to 30, well, you're not to the point where you probably can entertain a lot of expenses out of there, you know. But if you hit 30, anything that goes over 30 then would be fair game to be, used to offset your borrowing for capital or what have you. So the range kind of is a nice thing. Obviously, your goal is 25, but you're gonna flip-flop one side of that, just through the normal course of operations.
So Mike, Dunn County had operating expenditures in it, which is what you suggested.
Yeah, I think it's just a more clearly understood term.
Then Dan, in 4 on this document, I think we got to go down. The last paragraph, the county board is given the authority to assign funds to the finance committee for resources, fund balance as needed. Do we want to modify that or change that, given how we do things?
Generally, yeah, we could put some dollar limits on there. Generally, anything over $50,000 goes to the county board. Anything between 10 and 20,000, or 10 and 50 goes to finance committee.
Do you want to add that change? And then on 6, monitoring and reporting, it says a county finance director, which we don't have at the moment. What would we replace that with?
You can, I would just put county administrator and accounting supervisor. once we hire that person.
Blake?
We're gonna be able to edit this document, right? Or is this like this is our first try, right?
Yeah,
And so,
this won't be on the county board till September.
but what I'm saying is, obviously, we're gonna go and fix the names and all that stuff
Right.
and make a couple changes here and there. But you know, with a procedure or policy like this, if we do get a finance director, this document might have to change,
Right.
right? And so I don't know, even with the number, the range I like better because then you know, you don't have to change it every once in a while. You kind of got a range. So that's what I was thinking is this document doesn't have to be like perfect today.
No, no, like I said, it's not going to go to the county board till September at the earliest.
Yeah, no, another reason I like the range approach to it is, like I had said earlier, if you ever get into the mode of issuing notes and or bonds and you're being rated, you know, if you set it at 20 right now and you're at 19.22, S&P or Moody's are going to be like, well, okay, what's your plan to gain compliance? You know, you're not within your policy. Whereas if I would say 15 to 30, I think makes sense. And then you just keep trying to get to 25 and maintain it then your administrator looks at that too. When we could do the budget and we're applying fund balance, how aggressive do you get? You know, do you back off on that? Do you manage that so that, you know, you're trying to build it, you know? We're in the mode of building now. We're in the range, but we're trying to build it. What do we need to do to make that happen?
So Steve, what if we did 20 to 30% with 25 as the target? And then a few sentences that says, when fund balance is below 25%, it's desirable to work towards achieving 25%. And then a sentence that says from 25 to 30%, there are some funds available if needed that are priorities. And then Dunn County basically says you get over a certain point, do something with that money. And
Yep.
then over 30%, then, you know, move it to, you know, other places, you know,
Yep.
including funding the budget.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
Steve, I do have a question. So that 2.5 million that we have as a surplus, unassigned balance, does that include the LATCF money?
No.
So that brings us to 3.6, especially if the LATCF money has no restrictions on when to spend it and all that. It's just
Yeah,
basic money that goes into the general fund. And does it include contingency?
Well, contingency, no, is assigned, I think, currently.
And that's over 800,000, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so the LATCF wouldn't factor into that, although it's available. It does have requirements to track for expenditures, which is kind of weird because you can use it for pretty much anything. But because you're required to track it for the feds, I think you got to keep it in a separate fund, and that's kind of the recommended approach to it. If it could be included in your general fund, maybe it would be unassigned, but you know, there are certain things you can't do with it. Like you couldn't put it in a pension fund. You couldn't, it's like the same stuff as ARPA, which is very broad, but you can't just do anything. But the
Yeah,
list,
and
yeah,
you can't transfer it right into your general fund balance. That's really what you're saying, Steve. Yeah, and then
Yeah.
because its source is from federal government, you have to identify specific expenditures on it.
yeah.
So if you tracked a check to Jamar for $800,000, could you do it then?
Yeah,
Oh.
absolutely.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
And
The other important thing.
I did find it does say that it's retained until spent. So all funds are available to recipients until expended or returned to Treasury. There's no deadline.
So,
But you do have to report. Sue does a report, I think, on these every year. So
Yeah, in today's world, I would probably look at spending it. Who knows what the federal government might do?
I know.
yeah,
So they could change that.
yeah,
yeah. And the other thing to remember is you cannot use it to lower taxes. either.
So to Steve and Mike and Dan, as I'm sitting here looking at this, Dave Dawson has his hand up, but we know we have to spend 800,000 here shortly, whether it's all at once or over the coming year or so. So as we look at this fund balance, and yes, we've got this, you know, a million plus sitting aside that apparently we can't put into our general fund and call it unassigned, but we know it's there.
Mhm.
So, okay, on the one hand, we're well over the 20% and 25%. But on the other hand, if we borrow this money and put it on the debt levy, we could hold on to that 1.2 million.
Right.
But have we reached an amount where we have unassigned plus this other money that's effectively unassigned, that does borrowing this whole amount make sense looking at our finances, or?
Um, you know, well, first of all, let's hear what Dave has to say about, so we're
Well,
moving,
let me see if we can finish the fund balance discussion.
Right.
And then, but we're looking at fund balance, and then we've got all this other stuff that we know, like an HVAC project coming up.
Right.
We've got 1.2 million that we can't technically put into unassigned, but we know it's there,
Yeah.
serves the same purpose.
and another 800,000 in contingency that's
Yeah,
assigned, but it's pretty much there for anything.
okay, so are we, on fund balance, are we far enough along that we are ready for a motion? Dan, do you understand where we're at well enough on the discussion?
Yeah, I mean, Mike, Steve, I would say we effectively have a little over $4 million in cash. When you add up the unassigned, the LATCF and
Can you put that
contingency.
available funds thing up again, Dan? That
Yeah,
40,
it's more like 4.5 million, Dan.
Yeah,
yeah,
well, it's kind of being conservative, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, because look at the committed, keep going up a little bit on that page.
so your
mean, look at-
800,000 there is available.
And then adding that to the 2.5, you're at, 3.3. And then you add another 1,000,001 in there.
yeah, so 4.4.
Yeah.
So you'd be over, but of course, I mean, some of the funds are liquid. They're not allowed to be general fund, but yeah.
So do we want to, working on the fund balance policy, do we want to pick one to go with and then some recommended modifications? And then bring it back to finance at the next meeting for further discussion and tweaks? Blake?
I think we should look at take the Wapaka one, fix the couple items at the beginning, and then I think we need to decide right now, not now, but like, is 15, I know you're hung up on 20, but after hearing all this, I'm higher. Because I know that these funds aren't as, even though they're specialty revenue funds, like that's cash that we could use for the jail if we have to. So that's liquidity, and I think we're in a good spot. So starting at 20 to 30% is a range that I'd be comfortable with.
And then Dan with some language so that if someone says, look, if we're going with 20 to 30, if that's where it ends up, one person might say, hey, anything over 20, we can spend it. Someone else might say, hey, we really should be getting to 30, then you've got this tension. So like Dunn County has plus or minus 3%, and then some words maybe where if you're down to say, if we go with 20 on the low end, if you're over 20, yes, you could use some if it's important, critical. But your goal is to get, say, to 25, and then once, if you get to 30, you really need to do something with that money and then look at not raising as much through taxes in the coming year because you have some reserves. Something that provides a guide of,
Well, yeah, it'll only be a guide, because I want to point out, a future county board can do whatever it wants.
sure,
You're always gonna have that tension when you have money with future county boards. You may get a county board that says, no, we're not gonna spend a penny. You may get a county board that says, no, let's spend it all because we can. And, so I mean, the policy is well and good, but any future board can change it.
Well, and that's, but again, I think it's important that we have had the discussion, that we finalize this, because it's now relevant to us. It hasn't been relevant. And going forward, sounds like it's going to become more relevant if we keep doing our job the way we're hoping we can do. And that's where once it hits 30%, hopefully, we have a plan. And like he said, is if it's 28, it's over 25, but I would say that's great. Let's spend it. But then like Pat, he's not gonna want, it's not 30, so I think that's where we just need to have it spelled out. And then if we disagree later, that's great. But we have the guidelines now. Like I said, I think we should start lower, but now after hearing this, the one thing I caution, and I heard Steve say it, so I run our asset liability and we have these, if interest rates go up 400 and down 400, and we set these parameters for whatever. And if we fail, I have to talk about it for a lot just because. And so, and some of the fails are ridiculously like, hey, if it drops 400 basis points, we're all screwed, but we have to talk about it. So I just don't want to set us up, Pat, in the beginning at 19%, that's below 20. So being generous at 15 isn't the worst idea, but I'm okay either way.
Dunn County, they have a plus or minus 3%. So if you say, whatever, say 25% plus or minus 3, 4, 5%, then you have a target that you're shooting for. And then that plus or minus, if you say, minus 5%, well, then down to 20 is really as low as you want to go because you're not at your target of 25. But over 25, it's more understandable if there's something pressing that you would use that and not get to that 30. But it gives you a number to shoot for, but then gives you some sense of if you're low, you want to be careful. If you're above it, you've got more wiggle room.
All right, so I'll just put 20 to 30% plus or minus. No.
Well, I mean, if you do a plus or minus, it should be, pick the number in the middle. If for the machinist, that'd be a bilateral tolerance. 25 plus or minus, if we go with 5%, would get us the 20 to 30 range.
Okay,
So,
All right.
so do you want a motion on that, or you just want to bring that back?
no, we'll bring that back
Okay.
because, there's some changes and Pat, I'll talk to you about it in the meantime.
Okay.
I'll forward you the changes and
So let's go back to the sheriff HVAC item.
yes, and Dave Dawson
for
has.
D and Dave Dawson.
Yes, sir. So I spoke with John. John says in the current contract or proposal, it's written as pay as we go. As soon as, generally speaking, when they order the equipment, they usually invoice once the equipment arrives on job site. And then he said that there is other circumstances where if we need to, they can push the invoice out instead of the net 30, several months if you need to.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So now we need to decide how we're paying for this.
So,
But is that invoice for the complete amount? No,
no, they're gonna pay as it's paid.
as the invoices are, because in this thing, it says, as all invoices not paid, under payment terms. So are they invoicing us for how much when?
Well, I imagine they're gonna invoice us for half of it right away to pay for the
Right.
equipment.
Okay, and that's what I thought a month or two ago they were talking about.
Yeah, they're gonna want to pay for all that right away, so they lock in the material charges.
Correct.
And honestly, we want to do that because with tariffs and
Right,
changing every day.
yes, okay.
So I guess here's your question now.
So we do have this 68,000 that we can use also that's set aside for,
That's excess bonding money that was from insurance. We overestimated the insurance when we bonded, which is good because the insurance actual number doesn't come in till December. So we have to estimate. And so the 68,000 is an overage, which we can use for any debt levy eligible expense, including this one. So then we wouldn't need to use a resolution, a bonding resolution if we're going to pay cash. We just put in the cash resolution that we use that 68 grand, or we just save it knowing that a highway project may go over, or we use that money to pay for the roof at the HHS department, that kind of thing.
So having had this discussion on fund balance, the 20 to 30% range, so to speak, this LATCF money, which isn't technically unassigned funds, but we know it's there, and the other money,
So
does it make sense to borrow some or all of this, or does it make sense to use some or all of what we have available, given where we think we're at?
well, I, I think there's multiple ways to look at it. The LACTF money is currently getting 4.75% interest. Northern State Bank will give us a loan at 5.25. Over 6 months, simple math, that's a 1/4% interest we're paying on the money. So if I were a business, I would take the money, I would borrow it and keep the cash because all the uncertainty in the future. And we all know anything can happen.
The 0.5% from 4.75 to 5.25.
Yeah, but we're only borrowing it for 6 months. So it's essentially a 1/4%. So I would keep the cash because of the uncertainty. But the trade-off of that is we know we're going to end up raising taxes then. And nobody likes to raise taxes. So it's either that or we don't seal coat the 2 roads that the highway department wants to do next year, which is good for maintaining the roads long term. However, when those roads have issues a little earlier, all of us will be long gone. So I don't know. It's a question of, do we keep the cash, or do we know that we're going to have 1-year tax increases? I think you could sell the tax increase easily just by saying it's for the sheriff's department, and nobody's going to argue.
Well, when they get their bill. So are we far enough along in the budget that you have a sense of what a tax increase would look like if we put some or all of this on the?
It would be, it would be it wouldn't be much. Our mill rate last year was I think it was 450 per thousand. We'd be around essentially around the same rate because equalized value is going up. So in the end, it's still a tax increase.
So the other question is, if Jamar needs payments well before the taxes come in, where are we going to draw money to pay Jamar in the interim?
Well, that would be the that would be the contingency fund or the LATCF money. But if we did the loan, the bank would have us the money in relatively short order.
Blake?
So to me, it's a really tough decision, and ultimately,
So you talked about having 60,000 excess sitting around that we really need, I think, to seriously use for this as a beginning, just to kind of get us started. I think what I heard is Jamar's going to want basically 400,000 to 500,000 up front for the equipment, and then as they do their labor, that's when they get their and they'll bill us on that. So that 800 in contingency, is that like the goal to keep it at 800?
yeah, I would kind of like to keep. I mean, it's a little high, obviously, but we have so many unexpected expenses.
My feeling on this is that I'm okay if we use that 60 and borrow maybe the equipment on the front end, and then find a way when budgets are figured out how to pay from these other or assigned or whatever we want to call them that we can't like use it today. Like it's at 4.75, but is that in a CD where Northern State Bank and that matures? Does that come down to 4.25?
It's in his passbook account.
So again, I'm just saying, I don't know that looking here, but I don't want to borrow the entire amount and say, let's raise taxes, because I've been telling people we're doing better and we're not raising their taxes. And now obviously the jail is a costly thing. We get it. but I also don't, borrowing money when you have money for a couple percent, it's like, nah, just pay it, so I'm okay if we borrow half to get the equipment and get this thing going, but then I'd like to pay for the rest with funds that we have.
Well, and then we could use the LATCF money to pay
Yeah,
for,
and if we have to, we could use that,
Yeah. or we could use all of the LATCF money, to be honest.
Well, that's an option, obviously.
So I don't know. It's obviously the county board's going to decide on Tuesday which way to go, but they're going to listen to you three. So
Gary?
Well, I think if we don't have to borrow money, because not knowing what taxes are gonna go up everywhere else, it's not just the county when you pay your tax bill. And I'm fearful of where people look at their tax bill and sometimes they don't read who's taxing what, and everybody gets blamed for somebody else. But, if it's possible and it doesn't incur us to get in trouble later, I'd like to see us use as much as we can of money we have. If we have to borrow some upfront or something, I agree with Blake. If that half, has to be done right away and we don't have access to it, then if you're only borrowing money for a month or two or whatever, 6 months, it isn't going to be a big deal. But I'd like to see us use as much as our own money as we can and then take it from there.
well, I could tell you in the city, property taxes are going up in the city simply just because of the library, if anything. Because they just took that bond out this year. So, and that's 5 million in long-term bonding. The school district has levy authority for another up to 2 million a year. Last I heard, they're only doing 500,000, which is another story discussion. So I can tell you school and city are going up for sure.
Of course, if your equalized value goes up, that makes a difference too. Because a lot of times people see their tax bill and say, oh, my taxes went up, blame this person. And I look at their bill and I say, well, not really, because your value went up. So it's all coming from the same sources, but
Right. And there's a lot of towns in the southern part of the county that are going to be required to go through reassessment because they're so far behind that they're going to end up, some people are going to have dramatically lower taxes and some are going to have a lot higher when they do. But equalized value is going up everywhere constantly, which drives mill rate down. But
So, we talk about fund balance, and all things considered, we're in good shape. We've got some money that doesn't count towards that calculation, but we know what's there. So realistically, we're in a position where we could use some or all of that money to pay for this and still be, in good shape. But it is nice to hang on to that money because we can't raise the general levy very much each year, and so we know that's challenging. So kind of splitting the difference here, if we paid the first half with LACTF money and that 68,000 that we have, plan on that, and then we get a little further along in budget season and we start to firm up what we're looking at for tax increases and maybe know better what the city and the school districts are looking at like several months down the road, and then we can decide on the second half whether we want to borrow some or all of that or use funds that we have. I think we'd have a clearer picture. And as much as, you all know I would want to keep squirreling away if we can. But you do that because at some point you intend to use it too, and you only squirrel away so much. And at some point, like Dunn County says, you either put it towards a budget or other things you need, you just don't keep building it up. So realistically, I think we're at a point where we have enough built up, but we just don't have clarity on our taxes and other taxes and stuff, so.
yeah, I do think keeping a higher savings balance, is important because there's so much uncertainty going forward. But yeah, I mean, doing half is a reasonable compromise. And deferring the borrowing decision till budget is a reasonable compromise.
Do you know if the first payment is going to be half or less of the total?
Well, generally in these, and I don't know the answer for sure, but generally speaking, the equipment charges are at least half the invoice.
So we're gonna need a motion so that it can go to the board. So what, if we're gonna take it out of existing funds, and it might be over half, how do we want to phrase this?
Um,
Could I make a suggestion?
Sure.
I think, because you're not sure, right, what they're gonna bill you, when they're gonna bill you. And so once you say and award the project, you're on the hook for the 800 grand, for the whatever the Jamar contract is there. I would say, certainly all your discussion is good. I would say approve it coming out of, funds that you have on hand, the LATCF, if that's where you're leaning. But then you could always come along later and say, well, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to do this, and we're going to direct those funds somewhere else. But at least then, once you awarded the project, you have the funding to pay for it, and you could always divert and do something different once you know what's going on in the budget.
that makes a lot of sense.
And we would just explain this to the board that
Yes.
there might be a change in funding coming up as we are further along in the budget so
Yeah.
that they understand that. Do we have someone who wants to make a motion?
Blake will make a motion that we use LATF funding to pay for the HVAC at the jail
With the option to use bonding later.
with the option to borrow funds later.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So then,
Sorry,
Yes.
but up under your audit again, there are two other documents I just want to point out to you because they are very important too. So we looked at the AFR, the annual financial report. The federal FSA is your federal schedule of awards. That lists all the state and federal money that the county received and, goes through all the requirements there the auditors had to look at as far as, were there major programs where they, if they had findings or question costs, you can see on 10 through 12. If they noticed anything, so that's a communication to you that I think is important to, peruse. I don't think there was anything substantial in there when I read through it. So nothing like bad, but, just good information. And then the other one is your audit letter, which just is like the rep letter, I think, that kind of tells what they did, how the process went, that there weren't, just describes everything that went on.
Yeah, one thing you'll notice is limited internal controls. Every smaller municipality gets that same thing because we have such a small staff working in accounting. So it's very common.
Which, the risk there is, internal controls are set up to safeguard, your assets and cash collection. So, I mean, to the extent that those can be strengthened, you want to strengthen them. But in
Yeah.
some instances, you just don't have a choice.
That's right here.
But certainly, I think adding the financial supervisor would help with that because, things like, if somebody's actually issuing receipts and touching cash and doing things, and then they're doing the bank rec, that's a weakness because you don't want the same person who's affecting transactions in that regard to be monitoring it, so we would work to try to, once you have another body there to make sure that that strengthens.
When we're to capital improvements.
Yep, I think we're done with everything above capital improvements. The bonding resolution, given the motion on funding the HVAC, we won't deal with the bonding resolution today. So the next, we would be going to the capital improvements, so 4F.
So can we start with the easy ones first?
Is that 4F?
Um,
Where do you want to start?
well, they're all 4F.
You can start where you want then.
Okay, so just the IT one is pretty easy. So she's asking for 192,000 to replace computer stuff. This is all stuff that goes on a 5-year cycle and gets replaced. And I would say approve this one.
I see next year we have a big one coming, 130,000 up here in the courtroom and then 70 in the boardroom.
Right, that's to improve the sound system in here. So
I thought there was some grants we were going after.
Erica's looking for them,
Oh,
or she
is that
will be
right?
looking for them.
Just kidding. No, I'm joking. I was just curious if they.
But yeah, next that's to improve the sound system here, and we've had that discussion with some supervisors not being able to hear, and so. But that's not till next year, so you have time to change that.
What the budget was for 2025?
It was roughly at the 190,000.
Oh, okay. Do you want a motion to approve that?
Yes, yeah. Well, you can do each individual one because I think one of them might have some issues.
Okay, well, I'd make a motion to approve the 2026 budget for the IT.
And this is debt levy, just to clarify.
I'd second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Thank you.
All right, to go along with the regular IT is the sheriff's department IT. So again, this is replace stuff that's needs to be replaced. No, this is all basic to replace end of life hardware. And of course, at the sheriff, some of the stuff is even more important because of the emergency responses needed.
So just there's money set aside for this now, or
So this would be debt levy too.
okay,
And again, that's the standard, that's about similar.
okay. I would make a motion to approve this amount for the sheriff.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Okay,
Motion passed. Next.
and then here's the sheriff. Sheriff one, this includes the vehicle leases in it. So, and then just a few other miscellaneous items.
And is this higher than what we budgeted because that vehicle uplifting?
Well, yes, it is higher. It's what is it, 70,000 more than last year? But yes, part of that is because, 40 of it is vehicles. And the other remainder here is this lighting, prisoner cages, stuff. That would be for the building and the jail.
Before we
And
have a-
bulletproof vests, which are new.
Before we have a motion on this one, further down the agenda, we have a policy on vehicles leasing. You know, when you buy a vehicle, you know, they tend to put those in the budget because you're buying a vehicle. But I don't, with the leasing, I don't know if we've examined, do we really need to use a year as a point in time when we replace a vehicle leasing versus we get to a certain mileage or a certain condition in the vehicle? Because if we're leasing, it would seem like, and I don't know, but it would seem like we could do this, you know, let's say a vehicle meets our needs, both for the purpose it's used for and financially for, say, 3.5 years. Why are we picking 3 or 4 years to replace it if the more optimal point might be somewhere in between? And would that work for us through a lease program better than it does outright purchases of vehicles where we tend to put the money in the budget and replace, you know, because we do it on an annual basis?
Well, these are leases we've already committed to. So,
When you look at some of their vehicles, they got 15s, they got 16s, they got 2018s. Some of those vehicles could probably have a lot of miles on them if they're on patrol.
Yeah.
Not all of them, but it's certainly the deputies.
yeah, and that's why we're leasing them, because they get so many miles and so much abuse.
Oh yeah, here, 180,000 on one, 144,000, 125,000. The least is on one is 71,000. That's the lowest.
But we're transitioning to leasing all of their vehicles.
Correct.
Um,
But we're keeping the vehicles that we own that are still
Yeah,
serviceable, since we already paid for them.
so
So do we need a motion to approve?
Yes, please.
I have a little consternation about the proposed 2026 stuff, but it's like, I don't know. This year I'm okay. But like Pat keeps saying, we have these discussions around the vehicle purchasing policy. And then it feels like sometimes in intermediate, we've had requests variously to see. And so I do appreciate the enterprise schedule. I hope that at some point, and again, I know that you guys are managing it better, but the cost of these vehicles it seems like it's going higher and higher and higher.
That's
And
because we're replacing vehicles that that we purchased. So we'll be through that cycle in a couple years, and the numbers will be more steady.
Okay. So I will make a motion to approve this budget here that's represented with the sheriff and the vehicles
For 2025, 26?
for both for 2025.
Oh,
The 25 was
It's already
approved
done.
last
Right.
year.
So I'm just proposing with the
20.
proposed of 2026.
I'll second that.
any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next one.
So highway. So let me. Okay, so 2026, there's a big increase for road construction. 1.2 million.
Now, my question is, in 26 is potentially, and if Matt or somebody's on, they can correct me, but there's a huge project that's a flap grant.
Right,
Is
GG.
that $2.1 million, I believe, is that flap grant?
Yeah.
Federal land grant to do GG. Is that included in that? Yes.
Yes,
See, there's the top one, the 2.3. The feds, that flap grant is paying for that.
Right.
So that would cost the county. So is that representative of really that their budget's increasing that much?
right. He's asking for 1.2 million in debt levy, which is fairly consistent with past years.
with normal years.
Yeah.
Okay, so the total that we had on that total dollar amount,
Yeah.
um,
Dan,
So,
can you scroll up once to the beginning there? Because I think and I get kind of, I think so right there at the bottom. So if you look, 2026 is the second column, 4,574,000. If you looked right below it, where is the funding going to come from? Federal and state aids, that 1.2 million shows up there. Federal and state aids, the flap is the 2,774. So really, you're,
it's 1.2.
it's
Yeah.
actually less. So his budget's actually less because that 2 million's coming from the federal government.
Right.
yeah, because he's asking for 1.2 million of tax levy, which would be up from $1 million from this year. If you look on that second line,
Right. Okay.
So, but, so, and I'll go back to the schedule here. So these are the roads he's proposing to do. So in that later discussion about paying for the sheriff's, paying for Jamar and debt levy, these two seal coatings are things that we could put off if we were going to borrow. It's not ideal because the roads don't last as long and we don't seal coat them on schedule. But again, that's going to be beyond our problems.
I don't like that idea. I think we, as a county, have to invest in our roads appropriately, and to say we won't be here isn't genuous to what I feel is the right thing. So the road money for those should stay. I think they should keep on, and I think we should find money from elsewhere.
Yep. I'm just pointing out that's where you could pull it from if you wanted to keep the tax levy the same.
Yeah, I think that, like, using County End as an example, that was just blacktopped within the last few years, so we don't want that to go to heck.
Right.
Seal coating will cover that whole road again.
Yeah, seal coating very much extends the life of a road.
Yeah.
So,
Do we need a motion to?
well, no, there's still equipment.
Yeah,
I mean, you can make it. Okay, so here's his equipment budget. Okay, so first of all, plow truck. He is building, and actually, Bob Piff is on the line. He was talking to me today about building the trucks. Bob, are you there?
Now can you hear me?
Yep. So Bob, can you talk to me about your builder, being considered a builder now?
Well, one of the meeting I had with Daimler Truck, who is Western Star the manufacturer, now that we are considered a truck builder, we would be considered tier 1 as far as a diagnostic. So that would open the door for us. The training for the training videos for the diagnostic of the trucks and the setting up would be available to us now with going to tier 1. They'd be unavailable. They were unavailable to us at tier 2.
So now we can perform our own warranty maintenance and bill the company if we have to, because we're considered a builder now, as opposed to we're considered like a car dealership would be.
Yeah, we would be on dealer level. Potentially, we could do the warranty work and bill Daimler for reimbursement.
Yeah. So and we get all the access to all of the training now. So the plow truck, so as you guys know, they just started building the plow truck that they were going to send off to get built this year. And they're starting to build it now. That was part of the discussion we had with hiring the mechanic. Um, so, and we already had the discussion last year about having to replace trucks, plow trucks, because the older ones don't lose money, cost us more money. So I just want to, so I don't know if you want to approve all the equipment or if you want to wait on the equipment portion and think about it.
Blake?
So, and again, I'm not as close to the highway as many of you, but so the snowplow I heard overall was down a little bit overall. Obviously I'm not a future forecaster, but the trends of snowfall have been not great the last couple of years for people who enjoy snow. So questioning long term, every year now we have a plow truck of 365, 2026, 370. Not saying that this is even feasible, but are we realistically going to have to be committing to a plow truck every year? Just a high level question.
Year to year, you make that
Yeah,
decision.
yeah. What happens in the shop is the new truck goes onto the state highway. When that truck is on the state highway, we get reimbursed from DOT, whether it's plowing snow or going down just salting, sanding, because even this winter, even though we weren't plowing as much snow, we were still sanding, salting. But the new truck goes to the highway, and that we're reimbursed by the DOT. Then as those trucks move on down the line, then they go onto the county roads. So the newer trucks is on the state highway normally, and then we're being reimbursed by the DOT for time and equipment and materials. So when you look at the fleet, you almost have to replace a truck every year. And obviously, if when the highway committee goes down and looks at the equipment, you can just see the transition as they get older and stuff. And then, of course, the older it gets, the more maintenance it takes. But yeah, to answer the question, I think you're going to have to buy a new truck every year, just about. Where our savings should come now with the new mechanic coming on at some point here, that we build them because Matt showed the savings of how much that's going to save us per truck by us building them rather than buying a truck, sending it to the place that they put it together. So
Right. I should point out Bayfield County buys 3 trucks every year. So, and I believe we talked, Pat, you talked about the shop truck, how old it was and falling apart.
Yeah, I just found it ironic that the truck they need to get out there to do repair work is the much older than the trucks they drive around with. It's the same age as my truck at the farm, so I thought, you know what, I like that.
I, um, honestly, for the supervisor truck, I think $40,000 is nowhere near the cost. A new pickup truck is closer to 70.
But they're allowing for trade-in on this.
Yeah.
So my question on the supervisor truck to start with is further down the agenda, we have a vehicle purchasing policy, but we haven't looked at whether renting a truck, leasing a truck would make sense or not. I was really surprised forestry was able to lease a truck. I thought, my God, if they'll lease a truck to forestry, given where they drive, why not highway? So have we looked into highway on leasing?
The dollar would be the same amount as the forestry, and so yes, we could do that. That's a decision we have to make down the road. That's why I don't know if you want to approve the equipment budget today or wait till the next meeting.
well, the supervisor's trucks are the same situation. The new truck goes to Matt, Matt's truck goes down to the next person, and then eventually they work down to the summer help. I mean, so those trucks over years, they go, supervisor, assistant, down to the crew, and then eventually, it's interesting to go down there and look at their equipment and see how that rotation comes down. So
But do we know if leasing would be any more cost effective and serve the needs as well or better? Do we know that?
I think leasing would. Again, this shop truck, the supervisor truck gets a lot of miles. And Matt's driving all over the county with it.
Yeah.
So yes, I think it would be more effective. You could still do it the same way, pass it down the line and lease another one.
Yeah, I would just like to look at the leasing option versus purchasing, so we understand a comparison of financially and otherwise. And then on the seal coating, at best, we put that off a year or two, but it's, sooner or later it gets done and on schedule is best, obviously. But that one, if we get a little further into budget season, like the sheriff HVAC, we might have a better idea if that's something potentially gets put off a year or two, but my sense is it's not going to and probably shouldn't be.
So
I would prefer to just wait on this one, at the very least, the vehicle leasing, to understand that better. And then we'll be a little further down the road on the budget and understanding what you asked about if we want to delay seal coating.
all right, so as I propose, we postpone the highway.
Yeah, those are the only two things I see where any questions are coming up, and they'll both get, the truck will get done one way or the other, and the seal coating either on the proposed schedule or quite soon after, just to levy out the tax bills if that ends up being a concern.
Well, I think the more important concern with the seal coating is keeping up our level of spending so our general transportation aids stay up.
Yeah,
'Cause the amount of money you get for GTA is based on a 6-year average. So if you spend less money in 1 year, you're having 6 years where you're going to get less GTA. So you really do want to keep that up. And it argues for doing the seal coating and all the highway work as proposed.
yeah, at the moment, I'm supportive of staying with that. It's just the vehicle leasing.
Well, you could approve part of it. You could approve the roads portion and hold off on the equipment budget.
Like, I'll make a motion to approve the vehicle and, I'm sorry,
The roads.
the roads, and have us relook at the vehicle and purchases of trucks. I'll make that motion. So we're approving the roads budget from highway, and we'll come and look at once we talk about the lease versus own on the vehicles.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. I was going to ask you, Dan, on the roads with the funding for Madeline Island, that FEMA money, 800,000 or 900,000, do we know where that's at as far as?
The states keep saying that we're going to get the money.
Okay.
I know Eric has talked to him several times and Matt has talked to him several times, and they're
Right.
insisting we're going to get the money and don't see why we wouldn't get it. Erica has something to add on that.
His argument is that we will get the money because it was on a previous federal budget, right? So that if there is sequestering or changes, it would have to go back 2 years, because I believe the grant was given in 2023 and is technically on that year's, closeout. So I think they think it's safer than most.
But we all know how Doge is working. So we do have a clause, and the highway committee did approve a clause in the contract for that if the federal money is yanked, the project doesn't get done. And every contractor out there it's part of the contract, so they know that. So we're not going to get left holding the bag on that.
So we done with the capital budgets, or, okay, so then the next thing we would go to would be the health insurance?
Yep. So we got this is more information. So our surcharge went down as promised from 30% to 15%. And the exact numbers are on here. It's also been announced that premiums are going up 11%. So there is a little bit of a savings there in health insurance. I will say going forward, I wouldn't expect to see much savings, well, maybe next year, but after that, when the Medicaid cuts take effect, we are going to all pay for it in insurance rates. But those don't take effect until 2027.
So at one point when you chatted earlier, the surcharge wasn't being assigned correctly at some point, and I'm assuming.
Yeah, no, it is. It
Okay.
is. They're doing it correctly.
Okay, so the 30% for that first year,
Yep.
15 now next year, and then it goes to 0.
Correct.
And then that ultimately will be
Well,
cost. And so when they say the premiums go up, well, it's going down for the county 15%. The cost to the employee and the county is going up on the premium side 11%.
Right.
The surcharge going down, but your premium at the county and the employee, which we're paying,
Right.
80. Okay.
Right. So it's going to be about a wash. So, but like I said, I would expect, once the Medicaid cuts hit and that the prices for everybody are going to go up.
When
So-
we originally moved from a self-insurance to a state plan, I guess this is a little different than what I would have hoped for at the front end, where the first year the premium went up. And I did hear in Bayfield County and others that are on this, it happened to them as well.
Mhm.
And so this was not specific to Ashland County's premiums. This is the entire pool of WCA or whatever, the group. And
Yeah,
so as the employees are going to be upset, we have to say, hey, this was not our fault. Like this was a pool wide, and we're hopeful that they can get those costs under control. But I think we've seen in all the health insurance and all the industry, these costs have continued to bleed into the individual's paycheck, and it's a
Yep.
real issue.
and even if premiums go up a little bit for employees, the deductibles are still so much lower that employees are still better off in the long run. And I haven't heard one complaint from anyone.
Well, when we looked at this last year, the premiums were pretty darn similar. Had we stayed where we were or switched, had we stayed where we were, they were talking about not raising it, but that was only to try to keep us. So the surcharge, went from 30 to 15%. But that drop of that, if the premiums go up less than 3/23%, which is like 13.01%, and they went up 11%, then we're better off. What I didn't anticipate though is, we went from 300 to 750. I thought those were going to drop in half a year later. And if you take half of 300 and half of 750 and then multiply it by 110%, you basically get to the 165 and 413. So they did raise, the premium, but we're still going to be, I think, slightly under where we were, whereas everybody else that's already been in the pool, they're up 11%.
Right.
And next year, when we don't have that 15% surcharge, that as long as the increase in insurance is under 15%, we'll see another decrease in our actual costs. Meanwhile, where we were, they've been seeing increases each year. So in the long run, we're certainly going to be better off.
Yeah.
In the state of Wisconsin, which is running this program, raised their rates for town and county employees. One group, if it's 15% for the county, state employees got initially a 33% increase, but through political pressure, we got it reduced some. But I would still argue with anybody who has this insurance that there isn't better insurance out there. This is a great plan. And so I think that's probably why we haven't had many concerns, because it's as good as it gets. I mean, and I've had it for 30 years, so.
Yeah.
Anything else on the insurance?
Nope.
So after that, Dan, you've got a number of documents in the,
State budget, federal budget.
yeah, I mean, obviously there's more than we're gonna read through or go through, but is there anything in there that anybody would like to go through or has questions on?
So I'm gonna point out this number 10. The state is new. The legislature and the counties association got this for us. They created an annual appropriation of $2 million for counties who have the headquarters of a federally recognized tribe in the county. There's 11 counties in the state that have the headquarters of a tribe in its county. So we're looking at an additional state aid of $183,000, both next year and 27.
Is that a continuous long-term revenue stream?
It's for the current budget cycle. So the next budget, next biennium, it could be anything, we don't know. But we can count on it for the next 2 years.
And is there restrictions on like being used for
No,
no?
so that's part of the good news. I guess this just explains how much more the sales tax. Like I said, once you include all the things they made non-taxable, the shared revenue will go up 3.4% next year, as opposed to the 4.1% that's in the documents, because that didn't include the stuff they made non-taxable. WCA has a pretty good list of what they did. Notably, in land conservation, they appropriated enough money for the first time to pay 100% of the conservationist. So that's Mary Jo, 70% of the next, and 50% of the next. So we get a little bit more money there. They added some more money for county forests. They pay for Chris Hoffman. Let's see, GTA went up 3% first year and 3% the second year, so that's good. More money for agricultural roads. Fully fund county forest roads. Increasing the veteran service officer grants. So I mean, that's only like $10,000 a year. Yeah.
Budget or microphone, please.
I'm sorry, that collective bargaining, if that Supreme Court ruling comes in the next month and it's positive to go back, we are going to be in serious talks. Because if collective bargaining comes back, I don't know how that's going to impact the counties.
That's kind of one reason why I wanted to hold on to cash. Yeah, and that between that and the federal cuts, we could be looking at a much different world. I will say, you can only squeeze so much blood from a turnip, and we have been as fair as possible to employees. So, we added 2 holidays, we switched the insurance, we got the wage scale in that, we did a lot of things that are are employee focused. So I don't know where it's going to go. It's, yeah, I don't know. That court ruling is, but yeah, I would expect it soon because the new Supreme Court, yeah.
I'm not being positive or negative as a union negotiator for years for the state. I'm obviously biased, but the problem is being that it's been gone for so long, it will have a huge impact on the counties because not
Right.
only would you have to go back to bargaining, which is time, money spent, but like Dan says, we don't know where that would, what those would even look like now.
Right.
So
I would imagine the governor would call the legislature back into a special session to do something. Now, whether the legislature does anything, that's another story. They might gavel in and out like they've done in the past. But they would have to, I would think they have to address the issue because they'd have their own problems too.
Dan, on the, towards the bottom there, just above judicial and public safety, the Register of Deeds recording fee.
Yeah.
So can you talk about why they did that on removing that?
Where is it?
Right there. The last, yeah, the last bullet in general.
Well, because they like to keep our money, basically. We do the work and they want to take part of the fees to balance their own budget.
So the party getting a deed recorded still pays a fee. The county just doesn't get to keep any of it?
No, it's just like at the clerk of court's office when somebody, say a deputy pulls somebody over for speeding, 70% of that money goes to the state. So we fund their court system and they take all our money.
I was feeling better about the budget about a half hour ago.
Well, that's been going on forever. I mean,
Well, I think, it's actually not, this is public record, but the state brings in over $200 million in revenue from our courts and our judicial system, and they pay out less than half of that back to the actual people doing the work. And so while we can laugh, it's actually a travesty because right now, all the courts in all the small towns and it's basically bankrupted them and they can't get through their case logs, and then they wonder why their local folks in their communities are all upset with each other with their sheriff and their police. It's a terrible situation. And so we need to actually address this at the state level, which is something that I think we need to continue to pound the table about, is give the money back to the people doing the work.
and that was one of the major lobbying efforts by the WCA. Yeah, I mean, we're constitutionally required to run the courts thanks to the state legislature. And they decided to balance their budget and cut taxes. They'd take our money. So
On the HHS stuff, they've got some limits on stuff here. How does this work? We've got employees in HHS that do work. We're told things are reimbursed by the state, and yet we're giving HHS employees an increase in wages, but then there's, funding that gets limited or not increased. How does this work that we can still give raises and yet the budget gets tighter from the state?
because most of that reimbursement is Medicaid dollars. Again, the Medicaid cuts don't take effect till 2027. Of course, Congress specifically wanted to wait until after the election to make everybody feel all the pain. The state also, and it's this portion right here, got the additional funding by instituting the provider tax, which is the thing congressional Republicans were all crazed about. It's the way that states they tax a hospital, and then use that tax to pay the hospital Medicaid and then getting more federal dollars because of how much they're paying. So the state passed their budget a day before the feds did, instituting one of those taxes to get the $1.53 billion extra. So while we're going to see a cut in the future, there's also, they built in extra money into the system. So we don't know yet how it's going to affect us. And I'll be honest, nobody knows yet how all these things are going to affect us. We won't know for a while.
So just one question. When we go way, way back, we were looking at expenditures for health and human services. And there was a portion that was, it looked like $10 million. And then there was a portion of the county's pro rata share, which is about 900 or 800 and some thousand. And I think when I think back to that 10 million is all reimbursable expenses that we flow through health and human services. It gets paid back. And the county's portion is at 800 and some $1,000.
Yeah.
And so, because when I first saw HHS, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so much bigger than the county. And then I realized, okay, well, our portion, and I think they've done a good job with all the things we've had in our community of trying to keep that under wraps. And so I know and that's the hardest thing to control. I think the health and human services budget, because there's so much uncertainty on the federal and state side. And then locally, things can be happening that cost you money that you can't control.
Right. We don't know how many mental health care commitments are going to be every year. We don't know if we have to send a kid to Lincoln Hills, which thankfully the governor vetoed the increases. It would have cost almost $1 million a year for one kid if the governor didn't veto several numbers in the budget. It's going to be like $2,400 a day next year and $2,700 a day the last year. The governor vetoed the twos, making it $400 and $700. So it's at least doable.
So we're coming up on 2 hours. How much more of this?
We can stop right here.
Want to go through the vehicle purchasing policy, the card policy, some of that we could pick up with next time.
The one thing you guys should go through is the SNAP stuff. I'm just going to have you guys look at it later on your own. I will say on the SNAP benefits, there was a portion of SNAP that went to people who actually needed it, and another port for SNAP education. That the SNAP education funded 2 positions at extension, or 2.5 positions at extension. So as of September 30th, those positions are gone because the funding is gone. So we don't know how that's going to play out. But we do know the extension is losing 2.5 people. And I don't know what's going to happen to that halftime person yet.
I hate to say this because I've said it 1,000 times other places. I am fed up with people referring to welfare. There is no such thing as welfare in America anymore. SNAP is not welfare, it's an entitlement. Medical assistance and Medicaid is not welfare. And the W-2 program, which used to be AFDC, which was kind of welfare, in Ashland County, we have 7 people on on W-2 currently. 7 people out of the entire county. It's a work program. That's why there's nobody left on it. So I have people in meeting after meeting say, we got to get rid of the welfare. And they bring in SNAP and all these other things. They're confused. They don't know the facts. And this cut to Medicaid is huge because if I'm on Medicaid currently, for whatever reason, I go to the doctor at a clinic and it's paid. I lose my Medicaid, I'm still going to the doctor in a clinic, and guess who's going to pay that? Everybody here.
That's what I said earlier about everybody's insurance increasing.
And I'm sorry, but somebody in the Congress has to wake up because they are going to bankrupt health insurance. You think increases are high at 15%? Those people are still going to go to the hospital and doctor or emergency room with no insurance. So it's a fiasco waiting to happen.
So along the lines of what Chairman Mertig is saying, DHS state predicts that 244 people in Ashland County will lose their Medicaid. The problem with all of that is those 244 people got health care problems that are big enough to bankrupt the hospital. It's going to be extremely hard on rural hospitals. So I mean, look at Milwaukee, 20,000 people. So there's also a New York Times story about everything that goes through it all. You guys can read on your own. There's a NACO report on the budget, federal budget. So there's something from I found out from the California State Association of Counties that tells us about the federal budget. So
Those NRCS programs that they froze, I'm hoping that after they review that, they release some of that funding. I've applied for some NRCS funding and I'm a veteran, so I can check that box, but the things they froze, including if you're a veteran or a beginning farmer, it's like, great, And do you want to go through anything else we'll come back to the vehicle policy next time and we can look at the highway, hopefully in the interim, get some information.
Yep, and then so we'll go vehicle policy next time. Purchasing cards. I mean, I can just tell you, it's going well. They're using it highway and HHS. They're using it for every purchase where there's no credit card fee. So if you have to pay a 4% credit card fee, they're not using it for that. Doesn't make sense. But other than that, they're using it, and they seem to be happy with it. Planning committee update. I would just say to pass on that because they're meeting on Monday.
Okay.
Treasurer's reports in the packet. Investments are in the packet. No change in interest. Sales tax is holding steady. By the looks of the city, this past month, it's gonna hold steady. Yeah. People driving 10 miles an hour down Main Street all the time.
We want to set a next meeting date?
Okay, next meeting day. Yeah, let's get a calendar. I will say that it's going to have to be during the week of the 18th. Because I am going to be in New York the week of the 11th, and I'm going to be in Mexico the week of the 25th.
So the week of August 18th?
Yeah.
What's open on the calendar?
Everything. Do you want to do the 21st? Like keep it on a Thursday?
August 21st? 2 p.m.?
I also point out that means there'll be no county board in August either. Unless you guys want to. I'm going to be 80 feet underwater during the county board meeting. You can have it without me, but I'm going to be underwater.
I mean, if we need one, Gary could run it, if there's business that needs to be done.
Anyhow,
I'll make a motion if we're ready for the adjourning.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you. We're adjourned.